How you doing? Welcome to the stream, everybody. I am, as ever, Alasdair. Welcome to a very close to home bedtime stories for reasons we will find out shortly. First off, welcome and hello and good evening and all of those things to everyone who's here from the Manx Archives fandom, everyone here who's here from Pseudopod, friends who are here from all over the world, and there may be a couple of Manx people here, in which case I'm really sorry. And
Hi, everybody.
Marguerite says hi. And I enjoy the new emotes, and I am going to just step across to the monologue. For those of you who are brand new, the monologue is essentially, remember in the before times where we went to the movies? I do. And how there would be adverts and trailers on the front of it. This is your time to get settled and comfortable. Find somewhere that you like to be. If you need a drink, get one. If you need to eat a food, get one. If you need to take some meds, take them. And by the end of this, two things will happen. Firstly, I will have giggled a lot, and secondly, we'll be good to go. This week's monologue, it will probably become apparent who has written it quite fast, and I will explain at the end. Lovable television strongman Henry Cavill overclocked hearts around the world when he documented his latest PC build on Instagram this week, reminding us all, once again, that even Hollywood A-listers with inhuman physiques can turn out to be giant, lovable nerds on the inside. But, as it transpires, Cavill isn't the only one in Tinseltown who knows their way around those inscrutable, whirring machines we call computers. Indeed, in the wake of his charming video, a swathe of weapons-grade celebs have come out of the woodwork to reveal their secret hardware passion. If I'm giggling now, trust me, this is going to end badly. And have all, somehow, chosen to share their PC build secrets exclusively with us. Read on, then, as we revealed the rings of the stars. Jason Statham. The fabled son of a breeze block and a pop threat, living fight Jason Statham is a man of such power that any conventional PC build would quickly spiral into disaster in his hands.
Okay, you have to actually be able to complete the sentence.
I can do it. Would quickly spiral into disaster in his hands. If he can snap an inch-thick granite worktop in two just by calling it a... I did warn you.
Just by
calling it a dickhead, he can. I watched it in tears as he... annihilated my kitchen with swear words. What chance does even the sturdiest bit of circuitry stand against him? Luckily, Jason does not need to worry about such paltry concerns as components. As he graciously revealed to us, when Statham wants a new PC, or a thinking telly, as he insists on calling them, he simply sprints into the nearest desert at inhuman speed and begins kicking a patch of sand relentlessly until it fuses into microchips and functioning silicon wafers. He then proceeds to shout incredibly hard at this pile of fresh electronics, sometimes for hours, without taking a breath, until it assembles itself into a top-of-the-range gaming rig out of fear. Alas, any game Jason attempts to play spontaneously completes itself as soon as he boots it up, as it's too scared to be interacted with by him, so he just abandons his astonishing machines right where they were made, as silent monuments to his mastery over God's creation. Angela Lansbury. National treasure Angela Lansbury is best known for a career on stage and screen that has spanned 8 decades and seen her take on a wealth of memorable roles. But the good dame is also an utter beast at Call of Duty Warzone, where she dominates the gulag under the moniker Murder, She Wrote 420, and maintains a horrifying KD ratio of 9.4. As if that wasn't enough, it's one of Hollywood's open secrets that Lansbury is a warlock of extreme power, and she uses the powers granted her by the Abyss in order to build some bloody spectacular PCs. In the rare event she loses a round of Warzone, she will hurl her current computer into space to punish it, before lighting a few scented candles in her study and rattling off a quick canticle of ligature in ancient Akkadian. As we all know, this will summon an unholy familiar bound to her service, which Lansbury will send into the world to acquire a selection of reasonably priced components for her. Once the components are collected, she will extinguish every light in her mansion and assemble the computer with the power of her mind, while singing a medley of pleasant show tunes. Be warned then, if you're ever in PC World and see a dog with radiant yellow eyes and human hands come in with a shopping list, you will know Angela Lansbury is on the hunt.
We've just been raided, so say hello to everybody at the raid.
Hey everybody, how's it going?
Welcome to the opening monologue.
Welcome to the opening monologue. Idris Elba. Idris Elba laughed when I showed him Henry Cavill's PC build video. He was at my house, you see, where we were enjoying a nice lunch of crisps, as we often do, before settling down to play a spot of Age of Empires 2. Yeah, that's cute, Idris said of Netflix's Geralt as he fiddled about with wires. But watch this. Watch what? I thought to myself as Idris drained the last of a bag of Wotsits into his mouth. But the Hobbs and Shaw star just broke into a lopsided grin and said he'd tell me after he'd taken a quick break to go to the loo. When he came back from his ablutions, however, Idris revealed nothing. He just winked and said, "You'll know soon enough," before joining me in a 2v2 Team Islands game where we utterly thrashed the opposition. When the game was done, Idris bid me farewell, and with a single flap of his enormous arms, he soared out of my kitchen window into the sky. As his traditional parting cry of "Idris, away!" echoed through my home, I felt somewhat dejected that he had left before telling me his secret. Until I visited the bathroom myself and discovered his prank. There, lying in the bowl of my toilet, was an entire mid-range gaming PC, completely spotless and ready to play. I shook my head and smiled. Idris bloody Elba, I thought. You've only gone and shat out a perfectly assembled computer, haven't you? That smooth bastard. He'd done it again. Paul Rudd. Poor old Paul Rudd. The aging jokester would dearly love to get into PC building as a hobby, but it's just not possible for him. The sad truth of the matter, as we all learned during the film Ant-Man, is that Rudd is just far too small to operate conventional machinery. As luck would have it though, Paul is a humble man, and pretty handy with a broom to boot, so he's the perfect solution to the unenjoyable task of cleaning a keyboard. If you give him 20p, which is worth £1 million in ant money, he'll sweep your keys clear of all grime, even the debris left behind by a legendary Idris Elba crisp sesh, and crack jokes throughout in his tiny little mouse voice. Not only that, but for an extra 10p, he'll even wear his Ant-Man costume while he sweeps. And for 5p more, he'll hire some of his ant mates and maybe a woodlouse or two to get the job done quicker. Good old Paul Rudd. And finally, Lizzo. The celebrities listed above all have a pretty good game when it comes to PC assembly, but they still pale in comparison with US musical powerhouse Lizzo. You see, unlike the rest of these secret hardware fiends, Lizzo has no need of sand, demons, Wotsits, or anything else when she sets up a new rig. That's because ever since she solved a riddle posed to her by a haunted edutainment CD in her youth, the Detroit-born singer has been both blessed and cursed with the ability to transform into a PC at will. When she wants to take on her ultimate form, Lizzo screws up her eyes really hard and sings the forbidden note known as Middle J. I'm alright, give me a minute.
Seriously?
Whereupon she will morph into a tower unit with a spectacular RGB light setup in a matter of seconds. Unfortunately, she doesn't come with a monitor, although Harry Styles is rumoured to turn into an Acer Predator on moonless nights, and the only game in her Steam library is Daikatana, but it's an impressive feat nonetheless. Thanks for being able to turn into a computer, Lizzo. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the opening monologue, which comes to you this week from the excellent website Rock Paper Shotgun, and from long-term friend of this parish, Nate Crowley, a man whose brain is unlike any other on Earth. Hi, welcome to the show. So, what's been new with me this week? Not much. Let's move on. I am, of course, kidding. It is the final stages of Hugo voting. In fact, it will close at 8 a.m. British Standard Time, or as my buddy JD Buffington said, he kind of saw this on his Twitter feed and was like, Alasdair BST, Alasdair bullshit time. Alasdair's back on his bullshit. And Alasdair is officially back on his bullshit, everybody, because we're going back to the Rock today. So yeah, that's almost done, which is great because it's a tremendous honour to be nominated, and it is a horrible, horrible trudge to get here. And I want to try and have some fun with it, and I'm going to. So yeah. So there's that. The newsletter continues to tick over quite nicely. There is Worldcon, which is what the Hugos are awarded at, which will be next week, which is going to do a couple of funky things to our schedule, but we'll walk you through that when we get there. And I slowly feel like I'm climbing out of the never-ending pile of work, which is always kind of a massive relief, I'm not going to lie. Now, for the last few weeks, we have been doing this massive labyrinthine and actually bloody terrifying creepypasta called Search and Rescue by Kerry Hammond, which is fantastic. And those of you that weren't here for it, I would heartily recommend going back and taking a look at the YouTube account, which will of course be in the show notes, which will of course be on Twitter after we're done, to get caught up, because it's a really good collection of stories. It's one of the best kind of, here is something eldritch and terrifying and unknowable that you're, if you're very lucky, going to bounce off pieces of horror I've ever encountered. It was great. It was also grim as hell, a lot. And so last week we took a poll and we gave people various options, and this was the winner.
Are you showing it?
Yeah. Manx fairy tales, which are strobing slightly because of the light. Yeah. There's some history about this particular book because it is very old, which we'll get to after the show. But this one is going to be 5 or 6 little pieces of Manx fairy tale. And there are some content warnings, amazingly. But the content warnings this week are very occasional mild spookiness, brief implied giant with a capital G violence, giant tooth removal, and spooky black doggos. So if any of that bothers you, please feel free to step away. Also, things are going to happen to my accent on this one, folks. I give you fair warning, okay? There's some Irishness that will occur quite rapidly, and it's entirely possible that the Manx accent will push itself to the surface.
Content warning, accents.
Content warning, accent. Accents detected. Security alerted.
Exactly.
So, without further ado.
No. I think before you start, you should try to give the chat a little bit of a taste of what the actual Manx accent is like.
Okay. The best example of this I can give you is the deputy headmaster at my school was a man called Alasdair, who was as Manx could be. If the Isle of Man had a Captain America, it would be called Captain Vannin, and it would be Alex Madrill, and he wouldn't fight crime. He'd be just like, "What? I've got sheep. Leave me alone." And pretty much everybody in this school was absolutely terrified of him, aside from me, because I was a teacher's kid, and I was weird. And he very quickly realized I was one of the people who had the same kind of obtuse sense of humor as he did. We had this weird running gag where I'd hand him my geography homework with pop-ups in the most obtuse way possible, and I got higher marks if I worked out how to do them in weird ways. But he was very aware of the fact that he was the deputy headmaster of a school filled with 600 terrified farm kids. So he got us some leeway. And the game was this. If he couldn't see you, obviously you weren't misbehaving. If he could see you, this would happen. And this is the most perfect demonstration of the Manx accent I've ever heard. Listen to the waveform of my voice. You'll be walking down the corridor in the school and this booming voice would go, "Where should you be, fellas?" It's like a sine wave, right? It goes up and down. And the moment you heard that, you'd be just like, "Oh, I'm busted." In lesson, sir? Good boy. And he'd walk you off. The other couple of examples I can give you, I have never been looked at more. I've never been given more of a the hell look as when I was walking along the street in Douglas, the capital city of the island. City. It has a road. About a decade and a half ago, and there were these two girls about 150 feet in front of me discussing something, and obviously one of them was protesting her innocence because her friend just turned to her and went, "Be told, slag!" in that exact tone of voice, and I was just in awe. So the Manx basically the Manx accent, lots of volume, random hills.
It's very much like what I think of an upstate Maine
Oh Jesus,
kind of
yeah.
accent. You know, you can't get there from here.
It
kind of
is.
thing.
It is a little bit park the car in Harvard Yard.
It's not quite Boston, but it goes up and down a whole lot more. Be told slag. Yeah, exactly. It is kind of an upsell thing. You need to do one more thing before you forgot to bring chungus, didn't you?
Oh, of course. Hold on a second. Look at him. Look at his sides and his foam.
Really?
Yes. He's doing great. The fridge agrees with him an awful lot.
Can you please explain to the chat what chungus is?
Those of you who have not been here before, chungus is our sourdough starter. And he is about 6 weeks old at this point, I think.
Oh, I think he's almost 2 months old.
Yeah,
now.
he's a very good boy. We use the Joshua Weissman method, which we should probably drop in the Twitter thread, now I come to think about it.
And then if you joined us first thing before the stream went live, you saw the fantastic piece of artwork.
Which is by Specky, I believe.
Which, no, is by Cloudy Apple Art, which I'm about to put in the chat.
Yes.
Chungus Art. There we go. He is a very good boy.
In fact, Cloudy Apple Art is Specky.
Oh, very well. Fantastic. You are Specky and Cloudy. And Chungus Art. Toot Chungus Cute has become a thing. Oh, that's good. And as the chat can now see, there is a Chungus emoji now, and we also have from Robin, who joins our Sunday morning streams, a fantastic goose with a knife. And
Mess with the honk, you get the bonk.
I have a feeling next week that Dingus the Sunfish may be joining us.
Those of you who don't check out the Sunday stream, we started a new game this week called Beyond Blue, which is really peaceful and relaxing, and you swim around, I think, the Pacific, basically tracking fish and whales, and plots slowly present themselves. But you have a base of operations which is a submarine, and you kind of go there and catch up with the plot and can play with models of all the animals that you've catalogued.
Specky Drew Dingus! Oh, I have to find it! I remember seeing it. Where was it? Specky, give us a link if you please.
And there is Dingus. Dingus is a sunfish, and we don't know whether or not this was just random or whether it's programmed in, who circles outside the main window in the sub over and over, and he comes right up. And every time he does, my brain went, ham. And then he swims away and comes back and sees whether you've got more ham. So ham for dingus. Ham for dingus is a thing now.
Hashtag ham for dingus.
And now, because you people are amazing, a dingus emoji is on the way.
I'm sure it will be. Yay! Specky will have a dingus emoji.
Ham for dingus.
Ham for dingus. Okay, so we were going to do some fairy tales tonight?
Fairy tales. Yes. Let's go. I'm going to do the thing now.
You may do the thing now?
I'm going to do the thing now.
Okay.
These are, like I say, all from Sophia Morrison's Manx.
You want to give a little bit of background about her?
Yes, Sophia Morrison, this was a book published in 1911, was a Manx cultural activist and archivist and folklore collector, and she was one of the people who was instrumental in making sure these tales actually made it down the line. And you'll see in the Twitter thread, this is her only book, and this is the only book you see of Manx fairy tales. It's a very, very small community, and it's a Gaelic splinter community in a couple of very interesting cultural ways. Manx...
Oh no, you said the word archivist. She's a Manx archivist.
She's a Manx archivist. It writes itself, doesn't it? I can actually see it unspooling.
Running away from England, getting tired of things.
Yes, of course.
God. Oh God.
Of course. Yeah, Manx Gaelic doesn't exist. I actually had friends who studied it at GCSE.
But it's no longer considered a living language, is it?
Oh no, it hasn't been for almost a century. Basically, to study Manx Gaelic, you basically take 3 or 4 bits of Irish Gaelic and Frankenstein them together and kind of hope for the best. And that's kind of what the Isle of Man does. Culturally, it's about 60% Irish, and about 20% Viking, and about 20% Liverpudlian, and about 3% Hill. I grew up in a very strange place, and these stories will demonstrate some level of that high strangeness. Also, the Twitter thread has links to every single location I'm about to talk to you about, and do take a look at them, because even though it rains like 96% of the time,
and is windy 112% of the time,
and is a hill, the island is really nice.
We have Be Told slag calligraphy.
You are the best. You're the best. Thank you.
Oh, I love these.
Am I clear?
You are clear.
Okay.
The Manx Archives is a podcast. No, you have to read that. You have to read that.
Hold on. The Manx Archives is a podcast distributed by Rusty Quill and licensed under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, Share-alike 4.0 International License. And I'll do that again with a less subtle hint. The Manx Archives is a podcast distributed by Rusty Quill. Released under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, Share-alike 4.0 International License. Okay, I'm going to go now. The coming of St. Patrick. It was the time that St. Patrick was coming on horseback to Man over the sea from Ireland. When he drew near to the land, Manannan MacLear, that great wizard that was ruler of Man, put a charm out of him that made the air around the island thick with mist. He still bloody does that too, so that neither sun nor sky nor sea nor land could be seen. Patrick rode into the thick of the mist, but try as he would, he could find no way out of it. And behind him there was a great sea beast waiting to swallow him up. He didn't know in his 7 senses where he was, east or west, and was for turning back when there came to his ears, the cry of a curlew, calling, "Come you! Come you!" Then he said to himself, "The curlew will be down feeding among the rocks. She'll be calling to her young." After that, he heard the bleat of a goat. "Beware! Beware! Beware!" And he said to himself, "Where the goat bleats for the fall of her kid, there will be a steep bit of hill." Last of all, he heard the crow of a cock. "Come to us, come, come." Then, said Patrick, "I believe on my soul I'm back of Peel Hill. Here comes the accent." And with that, he took one leap onto the little island and put his horse up the sheer rock. Soon he stood, sure enough, at the top of Peel Hill. As he stood there, he cried out, "My blessing on the curlew. No man after this is to find her nest. My blessing on the goat, and no man is to see her bring forth her young. My blessing on the cock, and he shall crow at dawn even after at this same hour." He cursed the sea beast and turned him into a solid rock, and there he lies now with his great fin on his back. Where the horse's hooves struck the top of the hill, there sprang a well of pure water, of which man and horse drank, and it is called the Holy Well of St. Patrick to this day. If you go down to the ledges of the rock, which were made by the horse's hooves as he clambered up, you may see the footprints still. When Patrick looked about him, the mist was lifting, and he saw a great host of warriors round Manannan's fairy mount, with the first rays of the rising sun shining on their spears. But the saint knew they were phantoms raised by Manannan's magic power, and he bade them to be gone. And behold, they and their master, in the shape of 3-legged men, whirled round and round like wheels before the swift wind, which could not overtake them till they came to Spanish Head. There they whirled over the Howes so quickly and lightly that the gulls on the ledges below were not disturbed, then on over the rough, grey Irish Sea, till they came to the enchanted island 15 miles southwest of the Calf. Once there, Manannan dropped the isle to the bottom of the sea, and he and his company were seen no more. St. Patrick, on his snow-white horse, stood still on Peel Hill and blessed the island where he had touched land, and blessed it has been to this day. Then he leapt on to the little islet that he saw below him. Ever since, it has been called St. Patrick's Isle, and from the rocks on its northern side he watched the fierce storm which Manannan's going had made. Just then a brave ship, with foresail and mainsail gone, was driving straight for the terrible rocks. St. Patrick raised his mailed hand, and the tempest was calmed. The good ship righted herself again, and those on board were saved. They looked up with awe and thankfulness at the rider in his shining armour on the snow-white steed, standing bright against the blackness of the rocks. And ever since that day, the fisherman, as he sails past the Horse Rock, has often doffed his cap and put up this bit of a prayer to good St. Patrick. St. Patrick, who blessed our island, bless us and our boat, going out well, coming in better, with living and dead, in the boat.
That's kind of ominous. Living and dead in the boat.
I always take that to mean we come back, and also the fish who are dead come back with us.
You gonna tell them about the Coast Guard friends with that? This is going to be a very interactive series of fairy tales.
It is. The two most disreputable friends I have are called Pete and Ori.
Let's see how long it takes this story to get back to them.
This is a lie. They're actually called Alan and Ori. But Alan has such an inherently Pete energy to him that at school, a now unfortunately departed friend of ours christened him Pete. And everyone thought he was just so inherently Peatish, including his mum, by the way. That's just stuck ever since. His wife calls him Pete. I'm fairly certain his kids call him Pete. You know? Are we having trouble with pickups?
Yeah, I'm just going to move the mic a little closer.
Cool. Anyway, these two, much like me, made it into their late 30s and were about as astonished at it as I was, and decided that the best possible thing they could do was, in short order, co-own a sports car which they have renovated, co-own a boat in which they once accidentally gate crashed location shooting for a movie version of Treasure Island. Stop and think about how high-end a movie version of Treasure Island attempting to persuade someone that the Irish Sea is the Caribbean would have to. Yeah, I know, right? And then they decided to become Coast Guards. Now, I was filled with admiration for them, because I'm all about the first responders. I'm all about the emergency services. They're fucking great. And I was like, guys, this is really, really cool. What kind of stuff do you do? And Pete looked at me and went, well, sometimes we rescue dogs. Right, so what does that involve? It's really easy. You just abseil down a hill, because the dog will have fallen down a hill. And you put a harness on it, and then you winch it back up. And Ari kind of leans in at this point and goes, you do the same thing with sheep. I'm like, okay, cool. What about other stuff? And they both looked a little shifty, and they were like, we don't really do the big stuff. By big stuff, do you mean bodies? Yeah. What do you do with bodies? We just shove it out to sea and call a lifeboat. And that's how the Coast Guard works on the Isle of Man. I did find out later as well that basically, without going too grim, no one wants to pick up that particular awful job. So if a lifeboat find them, a lot of the time they'll just go, it's too near the coast, we can't possibly come and pick it up. Oh boys. And it becomes like a tug-of-war thing. Anyway, moving on.
You okay?
Yeah, I got a bit of a cough, that's all.
Alright, have some tea.
The Moddy Doo, or the Black Dog of Peel Castle. In the days when Charles II was king in England and Charles, Earl of Derby, king in Man, Peel Castle was always garrisoned by soldiers. The guard room was just inside the great entrance gate of the castle, and a passage used to lead from it, through one of the old churches, to the captain of the guard's room. At the end of the day, one of the soldiers locked the castle gates and carried the keys through the dark passage to the captain. They'd take it in turns. About this time, one and another began to notice, sometimes in one room, sometimes in another, a big black dog with rough, curly hair. He did not belong to any person there, and nobody knew anything about him. But every night, when the candles were lighted in the guard room and the fire was burning bright, he would come from the dark passage and lay himself down by the hearth. He made no sound, but lay there till the break of day. And then he would get up and disappear into the passage. The soldiers were terrified of him at first, but after a time they were used to the sight of him and lost some of their fear, though they still looked on him as something more than mortal. While he was in the room, the men were quiet and sober, and no bad words were spoken. When the hour came to carry the keys to the captain, two of them would always go together. No single man would face that dark passage alone. One night, however, one foolish fellow had drunk more than was good for him, and he began to brag and boast that he was not afraid of the dog. It was not his turn to take the keys, but to show how brave he was, he said that he would take them alone. He dared the dog to follow him. "Let him come," he shouted, laughing. "I'll see whether he be dog or devil." His friends were terrified and tried to hold him back, but he snatched up the keys and went out into the passage. The black dog slowly got up from before the fire and followed him. After a few There was a dead silence in the guardroom. No sound was heard but the dashing of the waves on the steep rocks of the castle islet. After a few minutes, there came from the dark passage the most awful and unearthly screams and howls, but not a soldier dared to move to see what was going on. They looked at each other in horror. Presently they heard steps, and the rash fellow came back into the room, his face ghastly pale, twisted with fear. He spoke not a word then or afterwards. In 3 days he was dead, and nobody ever knew what had happened to him that fearful night. The black dog has never been seen again. Except it has. If you check the Wikipedia page that will be in the thread, you'll see several sightings up to the present day of the Modidu in various locations. Also, brilliantly, I think it's actually a bad guy in one of the Fire Emblem games.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, how neat.
I think it's actually named as the Modidu.
Hmm? And the dog came back. Yeah, not good. Very good.
Okay, Tival, Princess of the Ocean. In
Like, seriously?
Oh, why are you like this? In the old days, Cullen, the smith of the gods, was living in the Isle of Man. It was the time when Conchubar was at the court of the king of Ulster and had nothing but the sword in his hand. He was a fine, handsome young man, and he had made up his mind to make himself a king. So he went one day to the druid of Clocher to ask him what he had best do. "Go thy way," said the druid, "to the Isle of Man. There thou wilt find the great smith, Cullen. Get him to make thee a sword and a spear and a shield, and with these thou shalt win the kingdom of Ulster." Conchubar went away, hired a boat, put out to sea. He landed in Man and made straight for Cullen's smithy. It was night when he got there, and the red glow of the furnace shone out into the dark. He could hear from inside the smithy the roar of the bellows and the clanging of the hammer on the anvil. When he came near, a great dog, as large as a calf, began to bay and to growl like thunder, and brought his master out. "Who art thou, young man?" said he. "Oh, Cullen," cried Conchubar, "it is from the Druid of Clocher that I come, and he bade me ask thee to make me a sword and a spear and a shield, for only with weapons of thy making can I win the kingdom of Ulster." Cullen's face grew black at first, but after he had gazed for a while at Conchubar, he saw that he had the look about him of one who would go far, and he said, "It shall be done for thee, but thou must wait. The work is long." So Cullen began to make the weapons, and Conchubar waited in the island. Early one brave morning in May, when the sun had just risen over Cronkin Lurie La, he was walking on the strand, wondering to himself how much longer Cullen would be making his weapons, and thinking it was full time for him to return. The tide was going out, and the sun was shining on the wet sand. Suddenly he saw something flashing at the edge of the waves a few paces from him. He ran up to it, and behold, it was the most beautiful woman he had ever put sight on, fast asleep. Her hair was golden like the gorse in bloom, her skin whiter than the foam of the sea, her lips red as the coral, and her cheeks rosy like the little clouds that were flying before the face of the rising sun. The fringe of her dress of many-coloured seaweeds rose and fell with the ebb and flow of the waves. Pearls gleamed on her neck and arms. Conchubar stood and looked on her. He knew that she was a mermaid, and that as soon as she awoke she would slip back into the ocean and be lost to him. So he bound her fast with his girdle.
Uh-oh.
And, Then she awoke and opened her eyes, which were blue as the sea, and when she saw that she was bound, she cried out with terror, "Loose me, man! Loose me!"
No. There's a request in the chat. You have to do a Valley Girl accent for the girl.
Okay, loose me, man. Loose me. Conchubar did not answer. I'll do it again. I'll put my meter on it. Ugh! Loose me.
There we go.
Conchubar did not answer, so she said again, "Loose me, I beg thee," in a voice as sweet as the music of Homor, the fairy fiddler. By this time, Conchubar was feeling that he would give all he had to keep her. He answered, trembling, "Woman, my heart, who art thou?" "I am Tival, Princess of the Ocean," said she. This is going well. She said, "Set me free, I pray thee." "But if I set thee free," said Conchubar, thou wilt leave me. I cannot stay with thee, Conchibar, she cried. Set me free. I'll give you a precious gift. I will loose thee, answered Conchibar. It is not for the gift, but because I cannot resist thee. He unfastened the girdle from her, and she said, My gift to thee is this. Go now to Cullen, who is making this shield or something, and tell him that Tival, princess of the ocean, bids him to put her figure on the shield, and round it to grave her name. Then thou shalt wear it always in battle, and when thou shalt look on my face and call my name, thy enemy's strength shall go from them, and shall come into thee and thy men. When she had said this, she waved her white arm to Conchibar, and plunged into the waves. He looked sadly for a long time at the spot where she had disappeared, and then walked slowly to the forge of Cullen, and gave him the message. Cullen finished the mighty shield, as the princess had said, and forged also for Conchibar a golden-hilted magic sword, and a spear set with precious stones. Then Conchibar, in his crimson mantle and white gold embroidered tunic, and armed with his great shield and his mighty weapons, went back to Ireland. All that the princess of the ocean had said came true. When he went into battle, he looked at the beautiful face in his shield and cried, Help, Tival! And in my mind, I will always hear her going, Oh, why you like this? Fine. Then he felt strength come into him like the strength of a giant, and he cut his enemies down like grass.
Adventure!
Adventure! Before long, he was famous all over Ireland for his great deeds, and in the end he became king of Ulster. Then he invited Cullen to come and live in his kingdom, and gave him the plain of Mirthmany to dwell in. But he never again saw the lovely mermaid.
Which is good, because he was creepy.
Because consent is a thing which apparently didn't happen back then. I will just bind you with my girdle. I love you. Leave me alone. Okay.
Can you not?
See, now every time I read the story, it will be Mamista. Just, ugh, fine.
Exactly.
Next up, the tall man of Balakuri. By the way, every single one, I'm exaggerating nothing. Every single one of these place names is real. Tom Crane was going home at midnight from Bradda Mine to his home at Colby. The road was lonely and he met no person, but the full moon was shining and it was as light as day. As he began to pass under the trees that grow around the house at Balakuri, a little dog appeared suddenly from the black shadow at the roadside and followed at his heels. He whistled to it, but as he turned his head to look at it, it ran on in front of him, and for a minute he did not see it. When he came in sight of it again, he was terrified to see it had grown larger, as big as a goat, and it grew bigger and bigger till it was the size of a donkey. It galloped before him and disappeared around the bend of the road where the gate of Balakuri is. When Tom came to the gate, he saw a very tall, thin man leaning on it, with his arms folded on the top. The beast was not there. As Tom reached the gate, the tall, thin man turned and walked up the long path that led to the house. When he got to the door, he turned again and walked back down the path towards Tom. By the bright moonlight, Tom saw the lace ruffle round his neck, the satin of his knee breeches, the silk of his stockings, the shining buckles on his shoes, the dress of bygone days. His face was white and dreadful. As Tom looked, he was all at once taken with terror and ran off as hard as he could go down the road to Colby. He had not gone far when he met two of his friends, Bill Milcreast and Bill Tier. Okay, sidebar. This whole just running into your friends at random on a dark road at midnight on the Isle of Man, totally plausible. Actually happens all the time. Seriously. He told them what he had seen, and they made fun of him and would not believe that he had seen any such thing. They said they would go back with him to the gate, so they all three turned back. Also happens a lot. Are you doing anything? No. Do you want to go look at a spooky gate? Alright then, seriously. When they got to the gate, they saw the big man, as tall as two men, walking up the path with his back towards them. As before, when he reached the door, he turned. But what they saw, they never told any man. They took to their heels, all three, and ran till they could run no longer. They were trembling from head to foot, and the sweat pouring from them. They were too terrified to go home, so they turned in with Tom, and they slept, all three, in one bed. Two things about that, real quick. Firstly, the distance between Bradda Mines and Colby is non-trivial.
It's a heck of a run.
It's a heck of a walk. It's a drive. I mean, I'm aware that I'm talking about the Isle of Man, which, you can, and I have, walk the spine of in a day. But still, midnight and you've just done down the coal mine. It's going to take you a while, is what I'm saying. And second...
The chat is now fascinated by the fact that there was only one bed. This is turning into fan fiction that writes itself.
And secondly, seriously, Manx culture is actually there's a big part of it that is actually beautifully encapsulated in that story. And it's that, what you doing? And there was a spooky thing. You want to go poke it? Yeah, alright. Seriously, I have had so many of my wacky high school adventures began with that. Or with variations on it. What you doing? I'm trying to turn the toaster into a bread cannon. What's in this bottle in the back of the car? Oh, that's possibly napalm. What's in the other bottle in the back of the car? I'm experimenting with petrol bombs. These are all conversations I've had. Let's move on. Joe Moore's story of Finn McCooley and the Pagain. This Finn McCooley was an Irish giant, and the Pagain was a Manx giant. But anyway, at all, this Finn comes across from the mountains of Mourne to see what was the Isle of Man like, for he was seeing land. He liked the island uncommon well, so he stopped in it, living out Cregnish way. The Pagain was hearing great talk about the great Finn McCooley that was in the Sound, so he came down from the top of Barrule to put a sight on him. Finn knew that he was coming to have a fight with him, to see who was best man, and Finn did not want to fight. Leave him to me, says the wife, and I'll put the arrow on him. Before long they caught sight of the Pagain, and he was a walking terror. He was coming from Barrule to them in a mighty pursue. That is absolutely what's written. The Pagain is doing a pursue. You're welcome. Slip in the cradle, Finn, says she. It's me that'll speak to him. Up comes the Pagain to the door, hot foot. Where's himself? Says he. This man is gone from home this bit, says she. What is it you want with him? There's no hurry on me. I'll put my foot inside and wait till he comes back, says he. Please yourself, says she, and you'll please me, but I must get on with my baking. Who have you got in the cradle? Says he. Oh, that's a babby, says she. And in the name of the unknown powers, what sort of a man is he himself, if his baby is this big? He's very big and powerful, says she. Aye, and the child is favouring the father. She was baking barley bread, and when the baking was done at her, she took the griddle and put it between 2 cakes of bread and gave it to the Pagain to eat, with a quart of buttermilk. He went to try and eat, and he couldn't. Oh, man alive, but this is the hard bread, says he. What sort have you given me at all, at all? That's the sort I'm giving, Finn, says she. And will Finn's teeth go through this? Ah, yes. Finn thought nothing at all of eating it. It's the sort of bread he was wanting, says Thrin. I love how we find out her name a page in. Finn got up out of the cradle and began to roar for a piece. She fetched him a clout on the lug. Stop your noising, says she, and stand straight. Don't be putting the drone on your back like that. And giving him a butter cake, she says, eat, lash into you, else they'll... Let me see if I can get through this. Eat, lash into ye, and let's have no lavins. You'll have the child's teeth broke in his head, woman. He can never eat bread as hard as that, said the Pagain. I can do that with life, says she. Now that done the Pagain. He sleeched out and claimed away again. He thought if Finn was that strong and the baby that big, he'd best catch home. But it was not long until the Pagain and Finn did meet, and they had the battle. One day Finn met the Pagain over at Kirkchrist Rushen, and they went at each other early in the day till the sunset. Finn had one foot in the big sound, and so he made the channel between the Calf and Kitterland, and the other in the little sound, and so he made the narrow channel between Kitterland and the island. The Pagain was standing at Port Erin, that's what made the fine big opening there. The rocks were all broken to pieces with their feet, but anyway, the Pagain came off victorious and slashed Finn up something awful, so he had to run to Ireland. Now Finn, he could walk on the sea, but the Pagain couldn't. And when Finn got off and he couldn't get more revenge on him, he tore a tooth out and hove it, whizzing through the air after Finn. It hit him on the back of the head, and then it fell into the sea and became what we are now calling the Chicken's Rock. Finn turned round with a roar and a mighty curse. "My 7 swearings of a curse on it," says he. "Let it lie there for a vexation to the sons of men while water runs and grass grows." And a vexation and a curse had it been to seamen from that day to this. And with my profound apologies to the entire Irish nation.
He yeeted a tooth?
There's actually tooth yeetage, yes. Now, what you're probably starting to realise is there is a certain amount of ecology going on here. The Moddy Doo may very well be the thing which is cited at balakuri. The Bagain, the Manx giant, we're about to meet another version of. The Isle of Man has a mythical ecology of its own, by and large. And it's really interesting to see that be dealt with in different ways in these stories.
What is the chicken rock?
The chicken rock, this is very, very technical, is a rock that looks a little bit like a chicken that has a lighthouse on it.
Where?
It's,
Where is it?
I believe it's in, I want to say it's in Douglas Bay, but I'm not sure. I do know the location's in the thread.
Oh, okay, cool.
Because it has an entire page all to itself. But yeah, for a long time the Chicken Rock was a major shipwreck point. So they basically went, "You two, yeah, go stand at this lighthouse and yell at ships." Alright.
Wave a light around.
You know, no. You know,
But that's different from the Tower of Refuge, right?
Yes, the Tower of Refuge is in Douglas Bay, which is a very small tower. It's basically the mildly oceanic equivalent of the house halfway up Snowdon I was talking about last week, where instead of, "Oh, I'm very tired and it's snowing and I'm about to die," "Oh, look, Welsh cakes in a kettle," it's, "Oh my god, the ship is wrecked, aye, quickly rush into this castle." Similar process, remarkably different ecology, yeah. But I mean, all
Folks
these
say it's by the calf.
Oh, that makes a ton of sense. Yeah,
the Chicken Rock is by the calf.
Yeah, the Calf of Man is the little baby island just off the coast of the Isle of Man,
and it looks like Hobbiton.
It does.
It looks like
It does.
the Shire. It's ridiculous and really, really pretty. And there's lots of water, and you wouldn't want to get anywhere near it because it's lots of different currents and rocks. And
You can actually see the current that boats basically just ride out to the Calf, and the current which they do their level best to avoid coming back from it.
Cool.
One more. The Bagain of St. Trinions. A long time ago, there came some monks to the broad, rough meadow, which is between dark Greeba Mountain and the high road, and they chose a nice place and set up a church to St. Trinion on it. But they reckoned without the power of the Bagain, who had his haunt in the mountain. The Bagain was mighty angry, and he said to himself, "I'll have no peace night or day with their jingling bells if I let them finish the building." And, as he had nothing else to do, he took it into his head to amuse himself by tossing off the roof. So when the roof of the church was first put on, there was heard that very night a dreadful sound in it, and when the people of Greeba got up early next morning, they found their church roofless, and planks and broken beams all around the place. After a time, and with great effort, the roof was put on again, but when it was on, a giant storm arose in the night, and it was blown down from the walls, exactly as it had happened before. This fall put fear in the people, for they were sure now that it was the evil, destructive Bagain himself that was doing the mischief. But though they were terrified, they resolved to make one more attempt, and the third roof was nearly finished. Yes, I knew tossing off the roof with it. You're welcome. Now, there was a brave little tailor living about a mile from Greeba, and because he had not too much worldly gear, he made a wager that when the new roof was on, he would not only spend the first night in the church, but also make a pair of breeches there. The wager was taken up eagerly, as they hoped that if the roof was one night up, it would be left on. So Timothy, now that was the name of the little tailor, went to the church on the very first evening after the new roof had been put on. He started just when the shadow was beginning to get grey by the hedges. He took with him cloth, needle, thread, thimble and scissors. He entered the church boldly, lit a couple of big candles, and looked all over the building to see that everything was right. Then he locked the door so that there was no way to get in. He cut out the cloth, and seating himself cross-legged in the chancel, he put on his thimble, and he set to work at the breeches. He paid no heed to the darkness of the lonely church at dead of night, but with long thread and needle he bent low over his work. his fingers moving backwards and forwards rapidly, casting strange, beckoning shadows on the walls. The breeches had got to be finished, or he would lose his wager, so he stitched away as fast as he could, thinking about the good money the people would have to give him. The wind was beginning to rise, and trees scutched their arms against the windows. The tailor looked cautiously up and down and round about. Nothing strange came in sight, and he took courage. Then he threaded his needle and began his work again. He gave another sharp glance around, but saw nothing at all except the glimmer of the place near the candles, and empty, deep darkness away beyond them. So his courage rose high, and he said to himself, "It's all foolishness. That's what the people about the Bagain, for after all, alike, isn't it?" But at that very moment the ground heaved under him, and rumbling sounds came up from below. The sound grew louder underneath, and Timothy glanced quickly up. All of a sudden, a great big head broke through a hole in the pavement just before him, and came slowly rising up through the hole. It was covered with a mane, of course, black hair. It had eyes like torches and glittering sharp tusks, and when the head had risen above the pavement, the fiery eyes glared fiercely at Tim. The big, ugly, red mouth opened wide, and a dreadful voice said, "Thou rascal! What business hast thou here?" Tim paid no heed, but worked harder still, for he knew he had no time to lose. "Dost thou see this big head of mine?" yelled the Bagain. I see," replied Tim mockingly. Up came a big, broad pair of shoulders. Then a thick arm shot out, and a great fist shook at the tailor's face. "Dost thou see my long arms?" roared the voice. I see," answered Tim boldly, and he stopped his tailoring to snuff one of the guttering candles, and he threw the burning snuff in the scowling face before him. Then he went on with his tailoring. The Bagain kept rising and rising up through the hole, until the horrible form, black as ebony, covered with wrinkles like the leather of a blacksmith's bellows, had risen quite out of the ground. "Dost thou see this big body of mine?" roared the Bagain, angry that Tim showed no fear of him. I see," replied the tailor, at the same time stitching with all his might at the breeches. "Dost thou see my sharp claws?" roared the Bagain in a more angry voice than before. I see," answered the little tailor without raising his eyes, and continuing to pull out with all his might. "Dost thou see my cloven foot?" thundered the Bagain, drawing up one big foot and planking it down on the pavement with a thud that made the walls shake. I see," replied the little tailor as before, stitching hard at the breeches and taking long stitches. Lifting up his other foot, the Bagain in a furious rage yelled, "Dost thou see my rough arms, my bony fingers, my hard fists, my—" Before he could utter another syllable or pull the other foot out of the ground, the little tailor quickly jumped up and made 2 stitches together. The breeches were at last finished. Then, with one spring, he made a leap through the nearest window, but scarcely was he outside the walls when down fell the new roof with a terrible crash that made Tim jump a great deal more nimbly than he ever did before. Hearing the Bagain's fiendish guffaws of laughter behind him, he took to his heels and sped hot-foot along the Douglas Road, the breeches under his arms and the furious Bagain in full chase. The tailor made from a round church, only a little distance away, and knew he would be safe if he could only reach the churchyard. He ran faster still. He reached the wall. He leapt over it like a hunted hare and fell weary and spent upon the grass, under the shadows of the church, where the Bagain had no power to follow. So furious was the monster at this, that he seized his own head with his 2 hands, tore it off his body, and sent it flying over the wall after the tailor. It burst at his feet with a terrific explosion, and with that the Bagain vanished and was never seen or heard of afterwards. Wonderful to relate, the tailor was not hurt, and he won the wager, for no person grumbled at the few long stitches put into the breeches. And for St. Trinions Church, there is no name on it from that day till this, but Kielvrisht, broken church, for its roof was never replaced. There it stands in the green meadow under the shadow of rocky Greba Mountain, and there its grey, roofless ruins are to be found even now. And that is Manx Fairy Tales.
The question was asked in the chat if this was a Manx Grinder profile. Don't you see my games? Oh, that's broken you.
I love how he's like, kadoosh, like, fine, give me a minute. So yeah, those are just some of the fairy tales. There's about another dozen in this from my profoundly weird little island. I hope you like them. Did they like them?
Yeah, they seem to have a lot of fun with them. There's a wide variety of them. I was kind of expecting the Manannan rolls the thing down the hill. You did it at first, but it was more about like the fog, and it was attributed to St. Patrick.
See, this is the really weird thing. The Manx national symbol is a triskelion. It's 3
Where's
legs.
your little flag?
Oh yeah, I used to have a little flag of it, which I think we've put in storage.
Yeah.
It's 3 legs, and the Manx national motto, if I remember correctly, translates as "However you throw me, I will stand."
The Caltrop flag.
We are a nation of caltrops. Which, it being me, I of course automatically associate with Buckaroo Banzai, and wherever you go, there you are, you know. I actually didn't know about the whole, the Triskelion was the thing which St. Patrick turned Manannan into, or Manannan's little kind of secret HQ thing going on, until I stumbled across this book. The version of the story I'd always been told is that Manannan is the Isle of Man's functional Merlin avatar. You know, he's the spirit of the island, lives on the mountain, the hill, and dissuaded invaders by rolling burning wheels down it, which is where the national symbol came from.
And it was never colonized by the Romans.
This is so cool. The Story of Man, which is the big interactive museum which is in Peel, and which, when I went there, was literally employing people to stand in a corridor and open doors. Like 100 meters of doors, like come in, go through, close the door, all this kind of stuff. It's actually a really good museum. Has as its prologue this kind of the history of the invasions of the Isle of Man. Now, Robert the Bruce invaded an awful lot, basically as a hobby. You know, he was bored of a weekend, and he'd come and have another go, and eventually he won. But, and you know, the Vikings basically retired there a lot of the time, done pillaging, you know. It says a lot about the fjords, doesn't it? My God, Sven, the rain is horizontal, the entire place is a hill, and the sheep look like the devil. It's so beautiful.
Oh, we haven't shown people what Manx sheep look like, have we?
Metal.
Oh,
Manx sheep look metal, is what they look like.
Let me find it.
But brilliantly, the Story of Man has this whole like big long prologue about all the great invasions of the Isle of Man. And then there is this 3 foot tall, very well designed plastic Roman figure on the wall with an enormous Perspex X in front of it and a box that just reads, "The Romans never came here."
Let's see if that works. This is going to send you guys to an eBay link, unfortunately, but this is the Manx sheep.
The Dora Broom version's the other one. Brilliant, thank you for that. I will track it down. Yeah, Manx cats are awesome. I had 2 growing up. Merthin, which is the Welsh for Merlin, who was a black rompy, which means he had no tail at all. And Emrys, who was this massive ginger Tom, who you could always tell he imagined he had this gorgeous lashing tail, and in fact he had a tail about that long. The spiky lads have entered the chat. Fantastic.
Yeah. They are so cool. I need to have your sister send us one at some point. I really want to get some of those.
They are coins which ask you to live deliciously. That is very true.
They are spiky lads.
Now.
No?
There's the thing.
There's
the thing we should do.
You want to do something?
It's this thing.
Dun, dun, dun.
So, who does our first shenanigans come to us from? Do we know?
Why don't you explain to the chat what shenanigans is? Because we had some raid folks join us.
For
So
those
go
of
to
you...
Shenanigan.
Oh yeah, of course, I was doing that and then I stopped. Welcome to Shenanigan. Alex approved. Shenanigans is the Magnus Archives section of the evening, where you, the audience members, bring us things which are related to the Magnus Archives through the fanfiction community and other locations, and I fail to read them while keeping a straight face. It's fun!
It is the source of many amusing clips.
Yes.
So the first one is from a Tumblr called Vigilo Audio
Supervenio. Okay, and I'm just going to jump right in because you're going to figure out what this is really quickly. Hello, John. Jonah here. Apologies for the deception, but I'd just like to take a moment to thank some of our patrons. You who watch and know and understand none. You who will listen and hear and will not comprehend. You who wait and drink in all that is not yours by right. All that is fear, all that is terror, all that is the awful dread that crawls and chokes and blinds and falls and twists and leaves and hides and weaves and burns and hunts and rips and leads and dies. Thank you. We really appreciate your support. If you'd like to join them, come to us in your wholeness. Come to us in your perfection. Or visit us at www.patreon.com/IOpenTheDoor and take a look at our rewards. So there's that. And we also have
a slightly longer,
but it's very good. This comes to us from Eldritch Cat Possum. Good job, Eldritch. Statement of Claude Morin, personal chef. Summary. The statement of Claude Morin regarding his time as personal chef to Elias Bouchard and Peter Lucas. And this was beta read by Specky. Statement of Claude Morin on his time spent employed as personal chef by Elias Bouchard and Peter Lucas. Original statement given January 10th, 2015. Audio recording taken directly from subject, January 10th, 2015. Statement begins. I have to be here. It was a condition of my employment that I give this statement, as I guess you would say. It was an exit interview, I suppose. I have a friend, Lars Olsen, opening up a place in Norway, and he asked me to come work for him. So I decided to give my resignation. I have to say, I have no regrets leaving my bosses. The pay was generous and the budget was equal to the wants of my clients. I did not exactly enjoy working for them. Mr. Lucas, he has a habit of jumping out of some unexpected corner to frighten me. I still don't understand how he does this, but I don't like it. Also, for the past year, Mr. Bouchard has shown up in my nightmares to discuss the menu or items he wishes to add to the shopping. I will begin where it started. 3 years ago, I answered a small online ad looking for a private chef that required pastry experience. I had other clients. I needed more money in order to afford living in this city, so I sent my CV and the references and received an unassuming email asking when I could interview. The interview was at their flat in Chelsea. I was greeted by Mr. Bouchard, who conducted the interview, and you know, he has this unnerving way of staring at you. Well, yes, that happened. I did not see Mr. Lucas at all, though it was oddly cold in the flat, and there was an unusual amount of mist. At first, the interview was normal, where I learned to cook, what my experience was, what hours was I willing to work, etc. Then it got strange. Mr. Bouchard seemed to know things I hadn't put down, like what I did when I was in the military. My mother's maiden name and what my greatest fear was. I didn't exactly feel comfortable at that point, but the salary he'd suggested was far more than any of my other clients could offer, so I stayed. I was asked for a demonstration of my pastry skills, and at the time, his request didn't seem difficult. A treacle tart. However, I did not like the way he watched me the entire time, smirking. the mist that seemed to follow me into the kitchen. It wouldn't go away. I didn't know why at the time. I thought perhaps the ventilation of the flat wasn't good. When the tart was ready, I cut him a slice. He slowly ate it, not taking his eyes off me. Seemed to enjoy it. He looked up at the mist and said, "Well, Peter, what do you think?" A huge man emerged from the mist, fork in hand, and took the rest of the tart and devoured it. I admit I jumped. I may have cursed. Mr. Bouchard grinned wider at me. "Really, Peter, do show some restraint," he said to the man who had come from the mist to eat the tart. The other man looked at me, not even ashamed. "Hiya, Himalayas." That was how I met Mr. Lucas, and it set the tone for my employment. In the beginning, I had other clients. However, within a few months, I didn't. Thanks in part to the generous salary Mr. Lucas paid me, but mostly they all terminated my contracts. Every one of them that did it in person did so the same way. Pale, shaking, jumpy, afraid. The ones that did, they simply stopped returning my calls and emails. I'm pretty sure the last, Mrs. Moore, just seemed to vanish. It was odd, but I was so busy with Mr. Bouchard and Mr. Lucas's schedule, I didn't have time to care. Other than dessert, which always had to be perfect. They had so very different tastes and needs. Mr. Lucas didn't seem to care about quality and would eat any kind of plain food you put in front of him. I swear you could put a pot noodle in the right bowl and he'd eat it. Mr. Bouchard, on the other hand, was more difficult. He expected everything to be organic, free range, high quality, and cooked in a variety of creative and difficult dishes. Nothing too bizarre or avant-garde, you understand, but asking me to make puff pastry from scratch because he fancied palmiers for tea the next day, or croissant for breakfast was not out of my skill range, but was highly challenging. Once, and only once, I decided to buy a slightly cheaper cut of meat for their dinner and pocket the difference, but within the hour I got an irritated call from Mr. Bouchard demanding I return it and buy the one he requested. Not that it mattered. The dish that night was roast dinner. Another thing was how they took their meat. Mr. Lucas, I liked it very well done. Mr. Bouchard, I wanted it rare. I could please neither of them with one piece of beef, and any compromising on my part would end badly. I'd find myself mysteriously alone for days, miserable, plagued by nightmares about being chased by leathery steaks with my mother's face. In the end, I just make two, no matter how much I ended up wasting. It wasn't worth it. This brings me to incidents involving cronuts. Mr. Bouchard got it in his head that he wanted to try some, and rather than avail himself of the many bakeries in London that have them, he wanted me to personally whip up a batch. After researching them and having come up with, in my considered opinion, a perfect recipe in my own time, I successfully made a bunch of cronuts for Mr. Bouchard. They were intended solely for Mr. Bouchard, but the thing was, the first 3 times I made them, Mr. Lucas was home from the sea. I would leave the freshly glazed cronuts on the bench, turn around, and they would be gone in a puff of mist and a trail of crumbs. All 24 of them. 3 times. In as many weeks. Mr. Bouchard was not pleased at all. And he'd bring up things that had happened to me in my past. Bad things. Which I never told him about. And yet he knew. The final time I made cronuts, Mr. Lucas was at sea. Mr. Bouchard was finally able to try my cronuts and told me they were acceptable. Just. Then he picked at them for 3 days but never finished them. As it turned out, he was not as fond of cronuts as he thought he'd be. Both Mr. Lucas and Mr. Bouchard have a sweet tooth, but Mr. Lucas was worse. He frequently will sneak things before they are cool, take pieces before it is time to serve them, lie to Mr. Bouchard about whether there was dessert at all, and of course outright steal the whole thing when Mr. Bouchard or I am otherwise occupied. This was one of the things they frequently squabbled over. Mr. Lucas was called in turns a greedy oaf, a thoughtless pig, thieving sneak, and a lying prat. Divorce would often be brought up by Mr. Bouchard during these arguments. As far as I knew, they never went through with it. When Mr. Lucas made off with that tower of profiteroles right before a dinner party, I was sure they were going to get divorced. I had never seen Mr. Bouchard so angry. I wasn't sure Mr. Lucas would be alive very much longer. I left that night, sure I would come back to our crime scene the next day. However, cancelling the dinner party, a bottle of Riesling, a half bottle of gin, and sharing the remainder of the profiteroles helped a great deal. Although the pay was generous as well as the budget, I could do without the nightmares and unrealistic expectations. My time in their employ has been strange. I am not sorry to leave. However, I am quite surprised that I am leaving so easily. I should be grateful for that at least. Statement ends. Post-statement. Audio recording by Martin Blackwood, March 7th, 2018. Mr. Moran disappeared shortly after the statement was given. We contacted his friend Lars Olsen, the chief owner of Seabean in Oslo, who said Mr. Moran never arrived there or took up his position as sous chef. No further follow-up can really be made. There's no way we'll be allowed to look into either Elias or Peter Lucas's personal lives. And there we go.
Strangely enough, I want cronuts now.
Me too. So that's our show, folks. A whirlwind tour around my tiny, tiny, profoundly weird island. And Eldritch,
whole bunch of nonsense.
Whole bunch of nonsense. Eldritch, thank you so much. That story is fantastically put together. I really like it. And now we need to do a little bit of logistics, I think.
Talk about what's coming up, yeah.
So the stream schedule is going to get a little funky for the next couple of weeks. This coming Sunday, we're doing our usual 10 to about 12 super chill coffee and video game stream, and that will be some more Beyond Blue. And then, later that Sunday, we will be on The Rusty Quill at 8 p.m. doing a thing that's going to look a lot like this, just with slightly different transitions and a horror story. Yep. Cool? Cool.
And a very awesome shenanigan.
And there is some primo shenanigan coming along for this one, believe me. And then...
Yeah, that will officially be an official shenanigan. I mean, you're on the big stream and everything, so...
Alex approved.
Well, it's too late to pull it back now, Alex. You can't
live!
Alasdair's been watching a lot of gargoyles and is very fond of Xanatos. Please forgive him.
I love how this completely random awful stuff will happen and then he'll just rock up at the end and go, good.
It was my evil plan all along.
Everything is going very well. The entire planet's on fire. I know. I bought a better one. Bye, losers. Then
Xanatos Queen Waves?
You know Xanatos Queen Waves.
Absolutely.
I'm not unconvinced Jonathan Frakes doesn't Queen Wave. Frakes away. Anyway.
So after that on Sunday.
Yes, we have the Sunday morning chill video game, and then 8 p.m. we have the Rusty Quill stream, and then on Wednesday I am doing a reading at Worldcon, which is in New Zealand. I will not be in New Zealand. I will be here, which is at 10:30 British Standard Time, and will be about half an hour long. I will then come directly from that reading, which will be here, to you guys, who will also be here at 11, not 10, and it might be we're still kind of locking down the content. The most likely thing is the reading at Worldcon is going to be 2 or 3 pieces of non-fiction, so it's probably
because that's what you're nominated for.
That's what I'm nominated for, because I'm a best fan writer Hugo finalist. Yeah. So I'm probably going to do the same material for that.
But starting at 11, not at 10.
But starting at 11, not 10. Yes, schedules don't exist. It's 2020.
Exactly.
Word.
Yeah, we're going to be on New Zealand time as
for a couple of days.
For probably most of that weekend, which means Sunday, when we would normally be doing a stream about 10 o'clock Sunday morning. We're not sure if we will have slept by then or not.
Because see, here's the thing. The Hugo ceremony kicks off midnight our time, and there's going to be about an hour on the front of it of the Retro Hugos and the Community Awards. And then...
It's going to go on for hours. It's going to be a long night.
Basically, it's going to have gone well if the thing's done, by my ballpark guess, if the thing's done by 2 a.m.
No, I'm thinking between 3 and 4, to be honest.
Which seems quite likely.
And then there'll be after parties, and then the sun will come up, and then I don't know if
we've actually done this before. It was so great. The year it was in Helsinki, we went to the after party, and then we had terrible nachos at 3 a.m. in a freezing cold square in Helsinki.
No, it was just so we were in Helsinki in the summer, and it is very common in Scandinavia in the summer to be up very, very late because the sun is up very, very late. So everybody was out on the street and partying at 2-3 o'clock in the morning, and the square was full and had tons of food carts, and we were hungry, so we got nachos at 3 a.m. It was metal AF.
And then we fell asleep for 6 hours. And then I woke up before Marguerite and found the one active Starbucks in about a 3-mile radius.
Because you are my hero. Yeah, so we're not quite sure what the content on Sunday morning may be or when. We will try and get that nailed down.
So we are basically
closer to the time.
Sunday the 2nd of August. We are going to be around. We're not quite sure when though.
Yes, and we're not sure. Beyond Blue has the look of being not a terribly long game, so we're not sure if we'll still be playing it by then. But
you may have us mildly concussed playing Crash Team Racing.
Yeah, concussed, exhausted.
Gender terrible nachos.
Gender terrible nachos. Totally legit.
Perfect. But
and you don't have to remember any of this. The closing screen will have it all written down for you, and we'll put it in the
thread.
In the thread as well. And then you missed one little part.
Which was?
On Sunday, when we do the Rusty Quill stream, we're going to announce what the next set of bedtime stories is going to be.
Yes.
Because we've pulled off something. We've gotten permission for something that we're going to announce on Sunday.
We have a thing which is going to take most of August, which we're really excited about, which is directly relevant to one of the things we've discussed tonight.
That's your clue.
That's your clue. Sounds ominous. Is it murder? Yes, it's murder. It's murder and giants prize fighting.
And 3 a.m.
Or is it?
Dun, dun.
Smoke bomb. So yeah, that is about our show. Thank you so much for coming along, folks. This is honestly a highlight of the week. We love doing this. We love chatting to you and talking to you about all this amazing stuff.
Yeah.
And we will see you on Sunday twice.
Once at 10.
Once at 10 and once at 8.
Exactly.
It is all good.
So have a food, have a water, have a good night, and we will see everybody on Sunday.
Have a good one.